I had been with Jess for nearly a year, close to 12 months that now felt like a lifetime. Since last Thanksgiving, we had shared countless moments, laughing, talking, connecting. A month in, we made it official. I was all in. I had hoped she was, too. It wasn't long before we talked about moving in together, making big plans for the future. But something had shifted, something I hadn't noticed at the time. The night we ran into him at that small get-together, there was an odd energy in the air. Jess and this guy exchanged a look, a glance that lingered for just a second too long. I felt it, a strange undercurrent between them, but I dismissed it, telling myself I was just overthinking it. After all, it was a casual gathering, nothing to worry about. But then, during the party, the conversation turned to a particular date. Jess had mentioned a place she'd gone to, a Christmas market from a while ago. I didn't think much of it until something gnawed at me again. That guy. His face. The way he kept glancing at Jess. Later that night, it happened. My phone buzzed with a message from him. The words were cold, simple, and they hit me like a punch to the gut. Hey, I don't know you, but I thought you should know that Jess and I hooked up right after Christmas. My heart raced. My stomach sank. I couldn't believe it. I confronted Jess. The second she saw my face, her body stiffened, her eyes dropped. She looked like she'd just seen a ghost. And then the words spilled out, confession, regret, guilt all tangled up. She admitted she'd met this guy on Tinder. They had hooked up a few times, but she'd stopped contacting him before we became official. She said she wasn't sure we were going to become anything serious back then, but now, with me, things felt different. She was sorry. She had considered telling me sooner but was afraid it would ruin us. My mind was reeling, but I held it together. I told her I needed time to process. I left her texts unanswered as I drowned myself in alcohol that night, trying to numb the hurt, the betrayal. I didn't know what to do. I felt crushed. Betrayed. How could she? Sure, we hadn't made it official yet, but we'd already been on so many dates. I thought we were building something real. Something lasting. I had no interest in other women at that point, only Jess. I thought she felt the same. She had hinted at exclusivity, at us becoming a couple. But she had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. What really stung, though, was the hypocrisy. Early on, Jess had been clear about wanting to take things slow, to build trust and a deeper connection before anything physical happened. But while she was saying that to me, she was out there, with him, someone she barely knew, acting like it was no big deal. When I asked her about it, she tried to justify it. It's different with him, she said. I took it slow with you because I thought we had potential. But with him, it was just a casual hookup. It made no sense. How could she justify it? She had built a connection with me, or so I thought, but instead of being with me when the moment felt right, she had chosen someone else. And then she tried to explain it away like it was nothing. I couldn't talk to my friends about it. I knew they'd hate her if they found out. But here I was, torn between love and betrayal. Could I ever get past this? Should I? Would it even be worth it? Sure, it wasn't cheating in the traditional sense, but it felt like a betrayal of everything we had been building. When I thought about it, I was left wondering, how could she have been so careless with my feelings? That evening, everything exploded. The tension had been building for so long, and now it all spilled over into our living room. I couldn't hold it in anymore. My voice raised, a tight knot of anger and frustration. I told my wife, no. I shouted at her that she was being cruel to our daughter. Over school photos? Was that really worth picking apart? I felt my chest tighten with every word I said. There was no point in being so picky about something so small, not when it hurt Haeyoung so much. But then my wife retaliated, her voice sharp. She tried to justify herself, saying that even Haeyoung herself had admitted she didn't like how she looked in her photo. "I'm only trying to help her," she said, as though the words could somehow erase the damage. But it didn't help. It only made everything worse. She stormed off, disappearing into the bedroom, tears running down her face. And there I was, standing in the middle of it all, wondering if I'd gone too far. Had I crossed a line? I raised my voice. Did I overreact? I knocked softly on Haeyoung's door. When she opened it, I saw the look in her eyes. She had heard everything. The fight. My words. Her eyes were wide with an expression that said it all. She'd absorbed every painful moment. It made my heart ache. I felt sick to my stomach. My daughter. My little girl. I'd overreacted, and now I had ruined her evening. I had made my wife cry, but worse, I had hurt Haeyoung. I sat there, quietly questioning myself. Was I the bad guy here? I had lost control, let my emotions spill out, and now it was my daughter who was paying the price. I had been so focused on the argument with my wife that I hadn't seen what was happening to Haeyoung. How could I have let this go on for so long? The night was heavy, and as I lay awake, the sound of Haeyoung's sobs drifted from the other side of the house. She always kept a brave face around me, but now, I knew. I had failed her. She always asked me, "Dad, do I look beautiful?" At meal times, she would ask if she was eating too much. I couldn't shake the fear. What damage had we done? How deep was it? Was I too late to fix it? I couldn't stand the thought that my daughter might develop an eating disorder, or worse, that I had let her suffer in silence for so long. I was going to fix this. I promised myself that from that moment on, Haeyoung would always come first. I would be there for her in ways I hadn't been before. I took a deep breath. The next morning, my wife's comments were still fresh in my mind. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like this. It was like a broken record, a pattern I'd ignored until now. She didn't see it, but I did. And I couldn't let her keep hurting Haeyoung. I knew I needed to talk to her, to figure out what had driven her to say such cruel things to our daughter. But deep down, I was already starting to prepare myself for the worst. This wasn't the first time. There had been other moments, other comments I had brushed off. I'd let Haeyoung suffer because I didn't know how to stand up for her properly. I was so tired of pretending everything was okay. And last night, hearing my daughter cry herself to sleep, it broke something inside me. My heart shattered. I was done letting this go on. I'd had enough. As the days passed, I decided I needed to spend time with Haeyoung, just the two of us. No distractions, no stress. It wasn't about going out or making grand gestures. It was about being there for her. I asked her if she wanted to stay home or go out. She chose home. And so, I made her favorite foods, and we spent the evening together, no distractions, just us. But as the days passed, I began to see things more clearly. The things Haeyoung had heard her mother say, the way my wife had spoken about her in front of other people. She had overheard my wife's comments, the cruel things about her weight, about her not studying hard enough. Haeyoung had been carrying this burden for so long, silently. I didn't realize how much it had hurt her until that day. She didn't want to surpass her mother's expectations anymore. She couldn't stand it. And when I asked her if she wanted me to talk to my wife about how she felt, she said it was the only way her mother would listen. But then, with tears in her eyes, Haeyoung told me something that shattered me. She said, "Dad, I think you should get a divorce." She was only 17. How had it come to this? I sat there in silence, trying to process it all. My heart was breaking for her. She had reached a breaking point, and I didn't even realize it until it was too late. I knew it was time to talk to my wife. When she came home from work, I brought it up. I didn't hold back. I told her everything. Ha-Young's pain, my pain, the hurt she had caused. But my wife's response was cold. Defensive. She tried to excuse her behavior, blaming everything on a bad day or her own frustrations. She even said, "If you have a problem with how I'm raising Ha-Young, she's all yours." That was it. The last straw. I couldn't take it anymore. I told her it was over. I told her to pack her things. I had tried, I really had, but I couldn't live like this anymore. I thanked her for showing me the truth, for letting me see my own self-worth. It was a hard, painful decision, but I knew it was the right one. For me. For Ha-Young. After a while, my wife moved out. When Ha-Young came home and saw her mom's things gone, she didn't say a word. But I saw it in her eyes. She knew. I pulled her into my arms. "I'm sorry for everything," I whispered. "But none of this was your fault. And now, as we begin this new chapter together, I promise her this: I will always be there. Always. She's my universe, and that will never change."